The idea of gun control is primarily why the SAFE Act was enacted. Governor Cuomo was the driving force, and we do have a legal requirement. And we spent about a year here at Montpelier evolving a policy, which it's also on the intranet, which the staff here, anyone involved in mental health treatment, is required to follow. So we're going to define the SAFE Act here, provide a summary, talk about the reporting requirements, the law, and the policy, and then Laura's going to talk about the SAFE Act entry, which is pretty straightforward, but we have screenshots that'll hopefully be helpful, and then a couple minutes for questions. So, as I said at the beginning, the reason that we have the SAFE Act is to increase the gun control in New York State. We're a little unusual here in New York State to have such a requirement. But after Sandy Hook, Governor Cuomo felt very strongly that New York State should have increased gun control and to protect the population. The definition of the SAFE Act is that it prevents criminals, and this is where we come in, the dangerously mentally ill, from buying guns. It also has a separate requirement where it involves illegal guns, registration, dangerous assault weapons. So our legal requirement is one facet. There's other pieces to this SAFE Act. It also protects law-abiding citizens, their right to bear arms. It does not go against anything in the Constitution in terms of arms or gun restriction for those people who want to buy, sell, keep, or use their guns. The SAFE Act, just to summarize, has a specific piece on banning large capacity magazines. There's background checks on ammunition purchases and on private sales. You're required to register existing assault weapons, so this is prior to the law going into effect, but anyone that buys anything is supposed to have their gun registered, a handgun, a shotgun, everything needs to be registered in New York State. And there's a 5-year recertification. So once a firearm is purchased, there is the requirement that it needs to be recertified. And I know that there has been problems with the recertification. It is a felony not to recertify your firearm. And I know that there's been some issues, especially upstate, where there's a lot of hunting that goes on, a lot of shotguns that are used during hunting season, and I know they had quite a bit of issue there getting the 5-year certifications in, so I think they had some leeway, but it is part of the SAFE Act law. There's also tougher criminal penalties for illegal gun use, including enhanced sentences for murder of a first responder and gang prosecutions and drug violent felonies that involve a loaded or unloaded gun, and enhanced penalties for possession of a weapon on school grounds and purchasing a gun for a disqualified individual. So the mental health law, it's 9.46. It requires us as mental health professionals to report to, it's kind of the lingo here, we'll explain more in detail what it means, but the local director of community services or his or her designee when, in your professional judgment, a patient is likely to engage in conduct that would result in serious harm to self or others. So what does that really mean? What is serious harm? So I think we all know, working with young people, that we have to make EMS calls, 911 for someone that's suicidal, homicidal, extremely violent in some way. It happens to all of us, hopefully not too often, but it happens. So it has to be something serious that involves serious bodily harm to self or others, suicide, homicide, and we have to take action for their safety, for others' safety. So enacting 911, getting a hospitalization, etc. What does it mean when somebody's reported into this data bank? If they have a firearm already, which is unlikely because we work with kids, but there may be a firearm in the home. So the state police are involved, and they're going to perhaps have someone If there is a gun in the home or this individual has a gun, they might suspend or revoke that gun license. The information might also be used, or it is supposed to be used, if this individual wanted to obtain a firearm. I believe it's a 5-year window when you make a report. So if a 13-year-old wants to eventually, you made a report when they're 13, and eventually now they want to buy, they moved upstate, they want a hunting rifle. If they're in this data bank, they're going to come up as an alert, and it may be that they will not be able to get that firearm, that hunting
But they
gun.
may be able to, too.
They may be, yeah.
They're just supposed to do a check. It's not a...
Well, yeah, I think they do a review.
Yeah, it's supposed to be reviewed.
Yeah. And there's a specific office that handles these reports in the data bank, et cetera. So you all have a copy of the policy, and the policy was developed, as I said, it took about a year to develop it. And so as of December 2013, Montefiore Medical Center staff are required, anyone involved in mental health treatment, including psychiatrists, physicians, registered nurses, all you guys, psychologists, social workers, licensed individuals, anyone providing mental health treatment or prescribing. If you have a patient that's likely to engage in, as the language says here, serious harm to self or others, you must file a SAFE Act report. There is an age window, it's 11 and above, adolescents and adults receiving mental health services at Monty. And the standard applies to anybody that has contact. Now, if someone is unlicensed or an LMSW, we'll talk about it a bit more at the end, but it would be the supervisor who would be entering that information in the database. It also includes face-to-face telephone communication. I don't know if you have an on-call service. We have an on-call service in school health. So if we have somebody that we're dispatching via 911, we have a after-hours situation, we would make a SAFE Act report on that as well. Under HIPAA, you are required, the disclosures are allowed under HIPAA, and it permits you, obviously it's for safety reasons. So even though there's a lot of information that goes into the database, it is required, and it's allowed by HIPAA. And what we do in school health is when we have a new patient as part of our intake process, we explain all the parameters around confidentiality, and we do have a clause about this now in our statement about confidentiality, just so that right from the beginning everyone is aware. That's your decision here if you would like to do something like that. But we feel for us, we like to be very comprehensive in the intake process and explain all the parameters around confidentiality. So we do put that into our intake statement about confidentiality. So mental health professionals are not required to make a report. You can read this in the policy. When you feel that the report would endanger either you or increase the risk of danger to any victims. Our best advice is if you have a situation like this, or if you have any questions about this actually when you're filing a potential report, is to call risk management or legal and go through that particular scenario with them, and obviously follow what their advice would be. And I think we would all call risk management if there was a risk of danger to a victim or to ourselves. Yes.
The example I was given was in, say, instances of a domestic violence situation with an adult patient. If they said something like, and if anybody comes to the house, I'm going to kill everyone. So it probably wouldn't be advisable just to put a random thing in the database that will send police to their house to do a gun check. That was the example, that highlighted what this means. But again, call, because I was really unclear and had to do a little research on what that meant.
Right. So Laura's now going to talk a little bit about how to file a report, and then we'll go over some specific FAQ type things. We've done this talk before, and then open it up for questions.
I don't know if I can get this on. I'm really loud. Can you guys just hear me?
Well, that's for the recording.
Okay, yeah. I'll hold it. Okay, so this is the website. It's the OMH website. They're the designated agency we report with. This is kind of what it looks like here, the front page of the website. If you have trouble finding it, you can always Google OMH SAFE Act when you're in the moment. And this is the form. You have to put, your first name, your last name, and who you are, your scope of practice. Yeah, and you can put if you're an unlicensed psychologist. I mean, for a trainee, like I said, or an LMSW, the supervisor does it for them. Mm-hmm. And the important thing to note about this is there's a time limit for which you can do a SAFE Act. So it's important that if you're the person reporting for someone, that they bring it to your attention immediately, or that it's part of your review of an emergency situation. I think it's 30 days.
Yeah.
I think it's 30 days. It's not a good idea to find out that as you're thinking about the fact that, you sent the child who was hospitalized for bringing weapons to school and threatening classmates in the after-school program, and you realize that you didn't put in the SAFE Act. There's a time limit to it. Truthfully, in that case, hopefully the emergency room did that as well, but still, you would want to do that. Yeah.
What happens if you don't meet the time limit, but they're still at risk? Would they say, sorry, we're not going to accept it?
Yeah. Well, if they're still at risk, you could make a current report based on like your current situation. So under this, you put your relationship, the person being reported. Just so you know, there's something on here about social security number. If you don't put it, you just don't, it lets you put it in anyway, because I frequently don't put that one in. You're going to write a brief summary of what happened, the specific threats, behaviors, or actions. I think the most recent one we did was a kid who brought knives to school in his backpack and was threatening to kill someone in the after-school program. He did get hospitalized, of course, but that was definitely worthy of a SAFE Act. So, okay, you report here yourself.
Also, we should mention that in school health, I don't know how you track your 911 calls, but we have an emergency transport form. So I added a line on there to include this number that Laura's going to talk about in a minute. So that's kind of our double check when we get this at our main office, the transport form. We always double check, did they make a SAFE Act report? And if they didn't, we'll call them right away and say, hey, remember to put that in. It's a really lengthy number, but if you have any way to track your 911s, that might be a good way to just double check that the report was made.
Yeah, and you're going to have to prove that you're not a computer to put it in.
Paul has a question.
Oh, yeah?
Just a quick question in terms of situations. So when I guess my question is, anytime, like the examples that you're giving of times that you've made this report have involved like weapons. You mentioned someone bringing knives to school or threatening to kill people with guns. But the way that the policy is worded, it's whenever there's a sense that someone might cause harm to themselves or others.
Oh, we report that.
Which is much. So
Yeah.
I guess my question is there ever a situation when you would send someone to the ED that you wouldn't make a SAFE Act report, or do they always go together because they both are coming?
We
they both have to
we put it together.
They mostly go together. An example I would use of a time that we talked about it and we didn't was unclear whether or not we called the psychiatrist who wasn't on site, and we were unclear whether or not somebody was having an adverse medication reaction. So that's clearly a 911 call, and that has nothing to do with the SAFE Act, right? I mean, that was just...
If you have any like gray
Yeah.
area cases, I would just call risk management and talk it over with them or supervisor or someone and discuss.
Or a situation where it's, you've determined like a voluntary hospitalization, but the person is going to the emergency room as agreed upon. We've had this before too, where it's been agreed upon that that's the safe place for them to wait for the bed because we're in a school health clinic. We can't keep them, they can't stay there all day. It was, it was voluntary. It maybe didn't meet that threshold. The bed had already been procured from the hospital. That's another one. It wouldn't be a SAFE Act report. They're just going to the ER as basically a safe place to be held.
But it was a psychiatric reason?
It was a psychiatric reason, but it was maybe like an uptick in symptoms where the hospital had been called. It wasn't like we're going to send them 911 if they don't do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
When we have a kid that we're bringing to the ER for suicidality, no matter what, we should be doing the SAFE
Yeah.
Act report, yeah?
Yes.
What if they're 9?
No.
No.
Right. So
11 and above.
on the age.
Yeah.
Even if you're sending them for like ultimately to get a cops referral, but you don't think that they are likely to hurt themselves?
We didn't hear that, Jay. What was
I
that?
said, I mean, there's still cases where we send people to the emergency room to get an expedited referral, and if we might do that even though we don't think they are, the language is likely.
Well, then you would, I mean, I think if you really believe that, then, call legal, talk it over with your supervisor. I mean, that doesn't mean there are reasons you send them
Yeah.
if you're not sending them for that reason. Although there are places you can just send them for a walk-in and they have to deal with them same day.
And I would just
So,
document
yeah.
the logic in your progress
Yeah.
report. Safe Act was not required based on da-da-da.
And so then if you're it's an unlicensed psychologist, they remove the field. So that's all that happens with that. And then this is just sort of another screenshot of kind of like, it's very brief, just what you have to, the reason that you write down. It's not like a detailed note, just the 1 or 2 sentence gist of why you're making this report. Very important to know, write down the reference number because you want to document that just like you do with ACS reports in your note. It goes away.
Get it back.
You can't get it back, and it's unretrievable. So sharing things we've learned the hard way, like, because you're in the middle of an emergency, you're doing this, and then the emergency room calls you back, you pick up the phone, and then you go to look at that number to document, it was gone. So that's how we know it goes away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to go back. Once you put in this report, what happens? Right?
So if
You
there's
a teenager who's kind
yeah.
of pills or whatever.
If there's a firearm in the home, it may be that someone's sent there. It could be that if there's a gun in a home, that license is suspended or revoked. Or it could be...
Just depending, yeah.
It depends. Or it could be if they're a certain age and, as I said, they move upstate, they want to buy a hunting rifle. Their name is going to be in a database, and it may mean that they cannot obtain a license for a firearm for a certain number of
This is not
years.
cross-referenced with the military, by the way.
Uh-huh.
So if we're putting in a report for like a kid, a teenager who's talking about pills,
Uh-huh.
does someone still go to their home?
No.
So this is just here so that person pops up on a registry if one day they want to buy a gun? Does that get,
Within 5 years, if within 5 years,
Okay.
yeah.
There might not be any other action. They're just in this registry now.
They're just in the registry, right? Mm-hmm. Paul?
So, and just to clarify, because I was confused about this, so if they're a parent, if they're living with someone else who has a gun,
Yeah.
do they come and do a gun check?
I am not
No.
sure, but it's anything is possible. I don't know
I'm
the
wondering
answer to
if the
that.
parent is law enforcement, let's say, or...
No.
I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, I think not as standard part of the database, it's only tied to that person. You're not giving parent, guardian, residence info.
I don't know the answer.
But we
to that.
can't swear what happens
don't know
once
the
it
answer
goes
to that.
in, That was not my understanding, but, yeah.
I think in New York, in the city here, most of the gun, there's such tight gun control here that, if a parent was worried, they might be a police officer or, it's mostly illegal guns, I believe, would probably be an issue and it may not be disclosed to you. But it could be that someone is a police officer or involved, that has a firearm. And I think I would probably say I'll get back to you on that or call risk management and run this by them.
Just anecdotally, the city seems to have no problem with this. There's massive opposition to this upstate.
Everywhere you see signs, Safe Act with a slash through it, and there were so many people, like 90% of them hadn't recertified their weapons in January. We gave this talk somewhere else, and we were looking up some of the articles, and the 5-year window was coming up, and a majority of people had not re-registered. And as I said, it is, I don't know if it's Class A felony, but it is a felony.
Yeah, and so it's gone amazingly well in the city because, as Kari mentioned, there are really not a lot of registered guns in the city. Like, a lot of the guns are illegal.
Yeah.
So this obviously does not apply to illegal guns. Yeah.
Does it cost a significant amount of money to re-register? Is that?
I have no idea.
They're just resistant. They want it revoked. They want the Safe Act
Don't pay
revoked.
anything to re-register?
I have no idea.
We don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure.
I think a lot of it's about like privacy rights and
It's encroaching on their gun rights, they
I was
feel.
just saying that I drove upstate over the weekend and I saw a whole bunch of signs like, don't for, like, we don't like the SAFE Act, they're gonna
Yep.
take our guns.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
I saw a vehicle once pulled up to an Applebee's that had those signs like plastered all over this pickup truck or whatever it was. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of
Also,
opposition.
Large agencies that work with a lot of troubled children, even if they're from the city, they're concerned that, all of our kids are going to now get put into this registry or this database that now you can track underprivileged, underserved kids that are getting shuffled. It comes from both sides as well.
Yeah, I think it is.
Point, Jay, yeah.
I'll be honest, I think it is a bit concerning. Like, we
Sure.
talk about this too. I mean, this is the law. This isn't in, our policy. But yeah, I mean, these are definitely conversations that we as clinicians have had before. Like, where are we putting this person and what could happen to this information?
Again, if you have any questions or real concerns, just call risk management, talk it out with them, and maybe you wouldn't make a report.
Yeah. Basically, you want to address the fact that there's a reporting requirement. So if you don't make one, take the necessary steps to document why you didn't.
Oh, but back up.
Okay.
So additional reporting is not required if someone else from Montefiore, another mental health provider, has already filed a report. And again, that's explained in the policy.
Yeah. So like if you're getting somebody from follow-up for something and you hear about the incident and it's already documented, you don't make another report.
Is there a place is there a checkbox or something that would highlight that this patient is part of the SAFE Act so you would know, or you have to look through every note?
I wish there is, I can show you, these are our templates, which are the Department of Psychiatry templates. So this is a place you could look. You can see there's a SAFE Act note. So it should show up in your list of notes as a SAFE Act note. Now, psychiatry, these are, in school health we use the psychiatry templates. So technically somebody should have documented a separate SAFE Act note where you just put that it was made and the number. However, if the person isn't that great at using this and they just wrote it in the body of their progress note, that happens too.
I'm sorry, I just
But-
want to clarify something, because Paul said you can search. Can you just clarify?
Oh yeah, Google it basically.
Well, you search in Epic, so there's a search bar.
See
The right,
So
top
in
right.
top right.
you can see here, yeah, the magnifying glass.
You can search, and if you type in whatever you want to search for there.
Like safe.
Like, yeah, so then it should come, well, a lot of things might come up that also have SAFE in it, but among them should be hopefully this. Hopefully they use the word safe when the documentation of this.
So does that search through the body of the note as well?
It searches
Okay.
everything.
All right.
It's how you can also find scales and all
You can
kinds.
find the Vanderbilt,
Yeah.
Or do whatever, it'll show up.
So yeah, it's the best way to find out whether or not somebody did a screener that's not an Epic or. Okay, and so this is just for additional information, and like I said, I understand some ambivalence about it. I think it's widely shared. Okay.
Are there any other questions or issues that we could help answer, direct you to people who could answer for you?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Any other questions or?
Yeah. Any other questions for our presenters?
Yeah.
I know you mentioned several times that if we have any questions or we're not sure if we should
Yeah.
report, that we should reach out to, what was?
Legal or risk management.
Legal,
Management.
sure.
Have you ever reached out to them and had them say, no, you don't need to report?
I get all the emergency transports and they all have a SAFE Act number for 11 and up.
I have.
She might have.
Yeah.
She oversees an OMH clinic.
So we do more of these. So
There's
that was
more
one
there.
like,
It's
I
middle
was like,
school.
I know our policy says any emergency transport. It was a kid who felt escalating symptoms. The family wanted an inpatient hospitalization. The hospital was going to take them back. The kid is bipolar, felt like they were becoming unstable. They felt like they needed an adjustment. They didn't feel safe at home. Multiple reasons. There was no acute suicidality or homicidality. Why would we make a SAFE Act
Did you
report?
call risk management to run?
Yeah, I called
You did,
legal. I
yeah.
said, I don't have to do this, do I? And they're like, no. And we had arranged
Yeah.
the bed with 4 winds. It was going to be available in the evening. The family was going to go. The mom says, if I bring her home, she's not going to go. So we called the ER and said, can they just come there and be held there? We already did the bed. You don't have to do anything, but keep them there. And they said, fine. So,
And I ask only because I
Yeah.
mentioned that
Yeah.
if my job were risk management, I would probably tend to err on the side of,
yeah.
let's make the report.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that they do err on that side. But in that case, it was kind of like we had trans care coming because the mom was like, she's agreed now. If I take her home, she's going to unagree to this, you know.
What's the harm in actually just making the report in that case?
There's no harm.
There's no harm. There's no harm. The clinician didn't want to make the report. And I said, okay, we'll call. That was brought to my attention. I think it would have been okay if she just said,
But what Jay's saying
Let's
is
call, but
true.
yeah.
You know, this is information. It's being put in a database, a lot of detailed information. So, you know,
People have concerns about privacy.
yeah,
and
of
how
course.
information-
Yeah, the treating clinician wasn't comfortable. You know, she came to me, we called. And they said no.
And it's the law.
Yeah. Yeah, you just have to make sure you're addressing the law, basically.
yeah. Alrighty.
Okay, thanks.
Remove this. Okay.
One of our providers just asked a question, which is what is the number of risk management? Where would you find
You would find that on the internet.
Yeah, Laura might know it. What's the number to risk management? We always call legal.
I don't have it off the top of my head, but I have it in my office. I can't get it to you today because my office is under construction, but probably
Oh my
next week I
gosh.
could send it to
Always
you.
call legal instead
I'll
of risk
find it this afternoon.
And we just search for legal on the internet?
I call legal, and they
Talk to
usually,
legal instead.
well, usually, this is what their wording is when I talk to them. They said, do you actually